Hey everybody, welcome to Module 3, and today we're going to be looking at pre-Columbian Latin America, and of course that means the time in Latin American history before the arrival of Columbus in 1492. And we're especially going to focus today on what are known as the three great civilizations of pre-Columbian Latin America, and that includes the Mayan or Maya people, the Aztec, and the Inca civilizations. So we're going to look at those today. We're going to start in Mesoamerica, and that essentially translates to middle or central Latin America, and that will be modern day Mexico. And in that area is where we're going to see the arrival of the Maya people as well as the Aztec Empire as two important civilizations there. So that's where we're going to begin. And again, that's known as Meso or Middle America. So it's a region of Latin America. So some of the greatest civilizations in the Americas developed there, and as I just mentioned, the Maya and Aztec come to mind. And if you look, we'll start with the Maya because chronologically they're going to be the first one that we need to take a look at. They were mostly centered in what's called the Yucatan Peninsula, and you can see it highlighted in red there on the map. That's the area today that would be like Cozumel or Cancun that a lot of people vacation. And that was the center of the Mayan Empire. If you ever visit down there, you can go see some of their ruins today. A lot of times they'll have tours and things like that for their pyramids. The Maya weren't necessarily an empire in the way that the Aztec are going to be later on, in that they weren't politically united. They were kind of a loose organization of city-states, and each of the Mayan city-states had its own ruler. So it was a little bit different than what we're going to see with the Inca and Aztec, who were more centralized. Here are some of the different city-states and ruins that you can see. The most famous one is probably Chichen Itza. There's a big pyramid there. Tulum is also one of the more well-known ones. And again, you can, if you ever get a chance to tour down there, you can see these things, and it's really pretty breathtaking. So their architecture is a key feature. They did build these towering temples and big palaces. They performed sacrifices, sometimes animal, sometimes human. They didn't perform human sacrifice on the level that the Aztec were known for performing. They played a really interesting version of what's called the Latin American ball game. Again, it's hard to explain. It's sort of a mix of rugby and basketball. If you're familiar with those sports, a lot of times the winners were sacrificed to the gods, as well as the losers. So it was a pretty high stakes game. And their religion was polytheistic, which of course means that they worship more than one god or many gods. And as I mentioned, human sacrifice was part of their rituals. Here are some of their famous, these are some of their more famous ruins, and this one is Chichen Itza, which is the most famous. And this is actually the court of the ball game, and the point was to throw the ball through this hoop here. So as I mentioned, that was sort of a similar thing to basketball. The Mayan people had a pretty advanced system. They did have a hieroglyphic writing system that was somewhat similar to what we see like in ancient Egypt, for example. Pictographic in nature, so it wasn't like letters per se, but images that represent either concepts or ideas. They also had a calendar and a counting system, and if you look at their number system here, it's pretty impressive. They had the concept of zero, as you can see there. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 5, and then of course 5 would be this line, and then 6 would be the line plus 1, right? So then you have 7 is the line plus 2, 8, and so forth. So it's pretty intuitive actually. So the Maya disappear around 900 AD. A lot of their cities were found deserted by archaeologists, and it's an interesting sort of mystery archaeologically speaking. There's a lot of theories as to why they disappeared. Some say drought or starvation. But they're the one sort of empire of the big three that we don't quite know what happened to. They're going to have a little bit of a resurgence about 300 years later, but never to that original level that they had in the 900 1000 AD range. So today the Mayan people still live in Latin America. Many of them in Guatemala and southern Mexico, and they still identify as indigenous or Mayan people. So they are still around. It's not like the Mayans have disappeared. Now. Maybe the most well-known of the three big civilizations would probably be the Aztec. They are probably the culture that's most closely associated with Mexico prior to the arrival of Europeans. And they lived, as you can see, in the Valley of Mexico in the central Mexico region. So on the map here, if you're looking, to the north would be where the Maya were from here, right? And Tenochtitlan was their capital. That's modern-day Mexico City. It was the capital, as I said. Interesting, it was in the middle sort of a lake. A really pretty, incredible feat of engineering. Legend said they settled there. They were told by their gods that they would see an eagle on top of a cactus holding a snake in its beak. And when they saw this sign from the gods, they would know that this would be the place to build their capital. They saw this on this swampy island in the middle of this lake, Texcoco. And of course, that's where they built their capital at Tenochtitlan. And this imagery, I think, is going to be pretty familiar to people that are into flags. This is actually featured today on the flag of Mexico. So how do you do this? How do you build in the middle of a lake? I mean, a lot of people would say this is a pretty modern engineering miracle even today. But they did. They built the land up, and they used causeways or sort of like land bridges to get in, and also a series of canals to sort of irrigate the place. Today, this is known as Mexico City, which is one of the bigger cities in the world. They did have a pretty complex government they created through an empire building type system. They were very, very militaristic. They had an emperor who led the people, and they were really in a constant state of war. Part of the reason was because their religion called for human sacrifice. So, the deal there was, with warfare, the idea was to capture as many prisoners as you could, and unfortunately for those people, they were often offered as a blood sacrifice to the Aztec gods. They had two pyramids, one to the sun and one to the moon, each of which they worshipped as deities. And this human sacrifice was on a very large scale. They believed that blood gave the sun strength to rise every day. Really, this was one of the things that horrified the Spanish when they arrived. And the Spanish were sort of renowned for their brutality, but what the Aztec were doing even took them aback. We know what happened to the Aztec. Unlike the Maya, they were defeated by the Spanish, and in 1521, the emperor was killed by Hernando Cortez. We'll get into that in the next unit, and that sort of marked the end of the Aztec as I'd say world power at that time. Finally, we'll get into the Inca. Now, they were not located in Mesoamerica, but on the west coast of South America in the highlands of the Andes Mountains. This is their most famous ruin that we'll get into in just a few minutes. As you can see here, really impressive architecture considering where it was, right? And as you can see on the map here, their empire, as I mentioned, was in the Andes region on the west coast of South America, in a large geographic area as well. The emperor had absolute power, and again, was almost viewed like a god king. 4 regions, in the capital there was Cusco. The empire was united by a series of roads, which were very impressive even by modern standards over the terrain. Their stonework was exemplary, as you can see here. They used that for roads and temples. Polytheistic, as with their Maya and Aztec cousins. Their primary god was also the sun, Inti. They did believe in reincarnation. And they also practiced something called cranial deformation, which is sort of a cultural thing to shape the heads of newborns. Medically speaking, the Inca were very advanced. They performed one of the probably first in the world successful skull surgery. They also used medicines and practiced anesthesiology, which is an interesting advancement. We do know what happened to the Inca. Civil war and smallpox outbreak, which was brought about by the Spanish and Pizarro, who came in the early 1500s and really fell upon them like a curse. Modern weapons and disease took their toll. Just to go back, I thought I had another slide, but their main sort of ruins are known as Machu Picchu, and again high in the mountains. These weren't discovered until the late 1800s, I believe. So this was a surprise to everyone. So that is it for the 3 great civilizations, kind of a whirlwind tour of those. Of course, you want to do the reading and make sure you catch up on some more details of this and follow up with it.